Okay, Genesis 12. We're back in Genesis again.
All right.
See, you guys finished an entire book of the Bible.
I forgot why we went from Genesis
Because
to
Job, because we're doing it, because we're going chronologically. So Job fit in about there. So, yeah. You'll notice when we get into like Kings, for instance, we'll be going Kings to the prophets, like Kings to Proverbs, like stuff like that. There'll be a lot of jumping around that then. All right, Genesis chapter 12. So you'll remember, I'm going to just really quickly brief you and remind you what happened so far in Genesis. We had the creation, the fall, the flood, and the fallout. Creation, fall, flood, fallout. The fallout meaning the Tower of Babel and their rebellion. So that brings us to chapter 12, which is about Abraham, but he's going to be called Abram still at this point. Okay, so his name will be changed. By the way, Abram means exalted father, and Abraham means father of a multitude. And so the rest of Genesis from chapter 12 here all the way through the end is going to be the genealogy of Shem. You remember Shem was one of the sons of Noah, and that's where we get the name Semite, the Shemites. So that's the line of the Jews. So Abraham, as you can see, let's go back into chapter 11 just a little bit here in verse 27. Now these are the generations of Terah. Terah fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran fathered Lot. So Terah is an offspring of Shem. So that's where Abraham was born from. So in verse 28, Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in the land of his kindred in Ur of the Chaldeans. So before I get back to that, so Genesis, interesting enough, I have all we've done, so chapters 1 through 11 covered 2,000 years. And this part here, the rest of the book of Genesis is only going to cover 350 years. So I brought this is a timeline this is the timeline of human history. And this is like whenever Christ returns, whenever that happens. So all that we did so far in Genesis went from there all the way down to Abraham, which is right way down here. The rest of the book of Genesis, turn it so you can see it. The rest of the book of Genesis is only going to go from Abraham until Joseph. That's it. So the rest of the book of the Bible, this book of Genesis does the offspring of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. That's it. So we're going to look at their history, their stories. And I think a lot of you already know stories from those, Joseph and his coat of many colors and all those things. So we're going to see all of those in the rest of the book here. I'll get it after. And interesting enough, the genealogy of Shem and his offspring is actually the story of the rest of the Bible, right? Because the Jews, and who came from the Jews? Jesus, right? So that's the whole story from here till the rest of the Bible is the offspring of Shem and Abraham, who brings about, and God will start to preserve the line of the Messiah to bring about the salvation of mankind. So back in verse 28, we have something interesting that I didn't mention last week. It says in chapter 11, Haran died in the presence of his father Terah. Now, Jewish writings say that they have a story of what happened here with this. And the story is that it's interesting because Terah, Abraham's father, it's actually said that he was somebody who made idols. And so Abraham was raised in a family that made false idols. And the story that the Jews say about Terah is that, and his son, Haran, is that he told his son Haran that he had to worship the fire god, and Haran refused. And so therefore he threw his own son into the fire and to have him die at the hands of the God he refused to worship. So it does say Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in the land of his kindred in Ur of the Chaldeans. And you can imagine, wouldn't that have a big impact on on Abraham, right? To know that your brother was killed by his own father, and just the tragedy of that. So that's an important insight into who Abraham is, right? We all have baggage, don't we? And Abraham had his own baggage. He knew that his brother was likely tragically killed. And we get more information about his baggage here. It says, and Abram and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram, this is verse 29 in chapter 11. And Abram and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai. The name of Nahor's wife, Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Iscah. Now, Sarai, who is Abraham's wife, who will be renamed as well, Sarah. Sarai was barren. She had no child. Now, we kind of read that and just like, okay, and skip over it. But in this culture, being barren would have meant that you were cursed by the gods. They would have believed that she was cursed by the gods. So Abraham not only had to watch his brother die a terrible death, or at least died, and for sure young, and then now his wife is kind of ostracized as she's clearly cursed by the gods, and she's barren, so he's not going to have any son. And I think you guys know enough about that culture that having an offspring was very important, right? Having a heritage, having especially a son, meant a whole lot. So his wife would have a stigma on her. Continues on. Terah took Abram, his son, and Lot, the son of Haran. So Haran was killed. So Abraham seems to kind of take like a fatherly role over Lot, his Haran's son, his grandson, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife. And they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldeans, that's southern Iraq. And by the way, Ur of the Chaldeans was a capital city. That's where Abram was living. It's a capital city. It was highly advanced. In that era, think of it as like the Silicon Valley, like the obviously they didn't have any computers back then, but this was like an advanced capital city that he came from. They went forth together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go into the land of Canaan, but when they came to Haran, they settled there. So God commanded Abraham to go into the land of Canaan, but he stops like kind of halfway there in Ur. It's kind of like he decides, like, I'm going to go right up to the border of what God says, but we're not going to go any further. How do I know that God already told him, gave him command to go to Canaan? Well, look at verse 1 of chapter 12. Now the Lord said to Abram, go, and actually in the Hebrew, it's now the Lord had said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. So he's already in Haran here, and in Genesis, we're just told that right now God's telling him go to Canaan. But we know from the book of Acts, you don't have to turn there, but I'll read it to you. Acts chapter 7, listen to what it says. This is Stephen talking to his speech to the rulers. He says, brothers and sisters, brothers and fathers, hear me. The God of glory appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he lived in Haran. That's what it says in Acts. And said to him, go out from your kindred, go to the land that I will show you. Then he went out from the land of the Chaldeans and lived in Haran. Same thing they're saying here. And his father died. God removed him from there into the land in which you are now living. So it seems as though he was traveling with his father, Haran, Abraham was, and his father, and they stopped in Haran, and apparently the father didn't want to go any further. So that's why they stopped there. Abraham should have continued on. But you understand his loyalty to his parents, right? We all understand that. But at the same time, the Bible does say, when Jesus said you must hate your mother and father, brother and sister, he doesn't mean literally you must hate them. He said, if you want to be my disciple. In other words, compared to your love for your family, your love for God must be more. Now, what does that mean? That means you should love your family, right? Obviously, we know that. But if your family asks you to violate what God is telling you to do, then you choose God over your family, right? And so that's what he's kind of failing to do here. But but God is gracious and merciful. He's not going to come down on him. He's just going to tell him again. Okay, I told you before. I'm going to tell you again. Time to go into Canaan. Continues on. This is chapter 12, verse 2. And I will make of you a great nation. Let me just pause right there. Abraham, there's three major religions that all come from Abraham. You guys know what they are? Johnny, do you know? Muslim, right? Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. Yep. Yeah. But now the Islam, they say we're going to get into Isaac, and Christianity and Judaism say that Isaac is the son of the promise. And Ishmael was the illegitimate child when Abraham impregnated his servant woman and had Ishmael. The Muslims say that Ishmael is the child of promise and Isaac is illegitimate. So that's where the difference. So it's pretty quick that we split off each other, like way back here. So we'll be getting more into that when the time comes. But yes, he is truly made into a great nation, isn't he? Today, Israel has 7.2 million people in it. And obviously, there's been Jews all through history, and there's Jews all over the world. But as a nation, I will make you a great nation. Today, Israel is indeed a very powerful, small land area, but very strong nation, very wealthy, and has 7.2 million people living in it, just as God promised. And I will bless you, and I will make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. And Abraham's name is great. He's revered among Muslims, among Christians, and among Jews. So his name is indeed great. And then he continues on, I will bless those who bless you. This is talking about Abraham and the nation of Israel, his offspring. I will bless those who bless you. And him who dishonors you, I will curse. And in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So let's pick that apart a little bit. He says, I will bless those who bless you, and on him who dishonors you, I will curse. If a nation chooses to bless Israel, they will be blessed for it. If a nation chooses to oppose Israel and curse them, they will be cursed. It's really that simple. And I believe that America is only being spared. I mean, America's gone in the wickedness right now. We all know that. And I believe the only reason one of the reasons God's withholding his judgment is because we are supporting Israel. And the moment that America stops supporting Israel, I think at that point God will remove his hand. Hopefully we don't. Hopefully we keep supporting them. But we have a promise here that there's a reward for supporting Israel. And all the families of the earth will be blessed. How? Let me ask you all. How are all the people of the earth blessed through Israel? It's a total Sunday school answer. Because of Jesus, right? Exactly. That's how all the nations of the world, all the people of the world will be blessed through Israel, because Abraham's offspring will bring about Jesus, who was born in Israel as a Jew, correct? So Abraham went as the Lord had told him. Okay, he's finally going to do what God tells him to do. And Lot, his nephew, Haran's son, went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. And Abram took Sarai, his wife, and Lot, his brother's son, and all the possessions they had gathered, and the people that they had acquired in Haran, and they set out to go to the land of Canaan. When they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place at Shechem, which is in Samaria, where the Samaritans would live, to the oak of Moreh. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, To your offspring, I will give this land. And we're going to see later that he gives the boundaries of what the land is. It's from the Nile to the Euphrates. So in other words, the Gaza Strip, God gave it to Israel, not to the Palestinians. It doesn't mean we should treat the Palestinians poorly. I'm not saying any of that. But that land, according to God, belongs to Israel. We're going to see it's for all time, he's going to say. To your offspring, I will give this land. So he built there an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there, he moved to the hill country on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent with Bethel at the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. Building an altar and calling on the name of the Lord, it could be like a sacrifice of praise, but it seems like this is a sacrifice of repentance, like an offering of repentance. And we're going to see he's going to do it again when he messes up next chapter, because he did stall when God told him to go there, and stalled and waited for years. So it could be he's like, God, I'm sorry, doing this sacrifice. I'm sorry that I stalled. I'm being obedient to you now. And one thing for us always to remember is no matter how many times we mess up, there's always an altar ready for us to turn around, to re-aim ourselves at our North Star, right? It's so cool we have a God who will forgive us over and over and over and over and over and over and go on hundreds of times, right? There's always an altar. There's always a way to set it. And we don't have to offer new sacrifices because we have a final sacrifice in Jesus Christ. Verse 9, and Abram journeyed on, still going toward the Negeb. Now there was a famine in the land. Okay, so we're going to have a test here. Abraham's going to be tested, meaning his faith is going to be tested. Do we really believe God is in control? How easy is it for us? We all do it. When we start to worry about something like money, and we're like, oh gosh, what if or you worry about, I don't know, whatever's going on in your life, right? And it's very easy to try to take control back, right? Rather than to trust God. We're going to see Abram is going to have an opportunity decision here. Am I going to trust God and do the right thing? Or am I going to try and take control and manipulate the situation to ensure safety? So let's see what happens. Now there was a famine in the land. So in Canaan, there was a famine. So he left. Did God first of all, he wasn't supposed to leave. So that's the first thing. But he left because it's a desert and he was worried about food and worried about providing for his family. Again, so that isn't the test I'm talking about, but he did try to take it in his own hands rather than trust God. So he went down to Egypt to sojourn there. Now, Egypt, we all know, has the Nile River, right? So it has this constant fertilization and water. They have that in the Jordan Valley in Israel, but in Canaan, in the part he was in, it's pretty dry. So he goes to Egypt, a place where they had food during this famine. So he went to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. By the way, Sarai at this point is 65 years old. So when he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarai, his wife, who was 65, I know you are a woman beautiful in appearance. Wow, that guy knows how to get on the good side of his wife, right? But it does seem like there's other places talks about that she was a beautiful woman. The Egyptians, by the way, at this time really liked Semites, women. They thought the saying was that our women fade early. The Egyptians would say that. You know what that means, right? Their beauty would fade young. But they believed that the Shemite women stayed beautiful longer into their life. They aged well, right? Like my wife's family does. They actually do. I'm not just saying that. They're game brownie points. Her grandma's beautiful for her age. Her mom's beautiful. Her aunt's beautiful. She's beautiful. So, my mom is beautiful. Thank you for that. So he said, I know you are a woman beautiful in appearance. And when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but they will let you live, because they thought they would try to take her as a concubine or a wife, right? Say you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life will be spared for your sake. So this is a lack of faith, and he's encouraging his wife to stretch the truth. Why am I saying stretch the truth? Abraham and Sarai actually were brother and sister. They were half brother and sister. You know that? They had the same father, different mothers. So he's not really lying, but he's still straight. He's still stretching the truth. He's still telling them, don't tell them that we're married. Just say you're my sister. And because he's thinking, because I don't want to be killed, right? So he's going to lie, try to control things to preserve his life rather than trusting God, that God's in control. It's better to trust God when the cupboards are bare than to be in the land of abundance outside of God's will. And that is always true in our life. It's always better to be in God's will in poverty, even, than to be in abundance and to be outside of trust in God. So when Abram entered, this is verse 14. When Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful. They saw that Sarai was very beautiful. And when the princes of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh. They're like, dude, this chick is so hot. You should get her as a wife. And the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. So he's like, oh, she's single? She's your sister? Oh, good. I'm going to take her as a wife. This is backfiring quickly, isn't it? And so he takes Sarai into his house. He's probably like, oh my gosh, what do I do? I can't lie now, right? That panic thing kicks in. And for her sake, he dealt well. For her sake, he dealt well with Abram. And he had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, female donkeys, and camels. In other words, Pharaoh gave Abraham a whole bunch of stuff because, well, he was taking his sister to be his wife. So he was giving him a dowry and going to bless the woman in the man in her life, right? Oh boy, this is really unraveling quickly. This is what he expected to happen, isn't it? But the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. So Pharaoh called Abram, and so Pharaoh started to connect the dots here. As soon as this woman comes into our house, all this bad stuff's happening to us. So clearly his God is doing something. So Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Apparently he found out somehow. Maybe Sarai told him. Why did you say she is my sister so that I took her for my wife? Now then, here's your wife. Take her and go. Basically, he wanted him out of his sight because stuff was getting bad. Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. Chapter 13. So Abram went up from Egypt. So right there saying went up, it's directionally, right? You picture the map. You got Egypt down here, got the Mediterranean right here, and they're going up into Israel, right? Up into Canaan. Now, it's not always that way in the Bible. If you get in the New Testament, for instance, there's points where Jesus is in in northern Israel, and it said he went up to Jerusalem. And you're like, but Jerusalem's south. So how is that up? Well, because it was up a hill, up a mountain. So a lot of this stuff you have to know, he was literally traveling up, right? If I'm like, you guys don't even have mountains around here, but if I'm in Pittsburgh and there's Mount Washington, if I'm in the North Hill, if I'm in downtown Pittsburgh and climbing the mountain, I'm going up the mountain, even though I'm going south, right? So it kind of depends on the perspective that you're writing it. But in this perspective, he's literally meaning up, north. So Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him into the Negeb. Now, Abram was very rich in livestock and silver and in gold. So it's very important to know that it's not bad. It's not a bad thing to be rich. Okay. But Pastor Stephen, it says in the Bible that the love of money is the root of all evil. It does not say that. Do you guys know what that verse actually says? In 1 Timothy, have you heard people say that? Money is the root of all evil? It doesn't say that. What does it say?
Love
Is the root of all kinds of evil. Right. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. So the point is that, you can be poor and have an unhealthy love for money. Right? Can't you? You can be rich and have a healthy viewpoint of money and not be living for your money. Can't you? So it's the love of money that is the root of all kinds, a variety of evils, not every evil. You understand the difference? Every evil doesn't come from the love of money. All kinds, all different varieties of evils come from the love of money. So there's nothing wrong with being wealthy. Oh, I know. Okay. So wealth isn't bad, but how it affects you can be bad. So he had all this stuff, livestock, silver, and gold, and Pharaoh gave him a whole lot more. So this Abraham was very, very, very rich. And he journeyed out from Negeb as far as Bethel to the place where his tent had been in the beginning. Remember in chapter 12 where he went and offered a sacrifice? He went back to that spot again. So he went back to where he was in the beginning between Bethel and Ai. Now this is interesting. Bethel means house of God, and Ai means the dump.
What?
The dump. So isn't it interesting that he's living between the dump, a town called the Dump? I guess it's like Cleveland, and the house of God. But we're kind of in that same place, aren't we? Because we're not quite in the dump because we're Christians, right? Where God has resurrected us from death, but we're not quite in our glory yet, which is still to come, right? So it's kind of interesting that he's in that in-between stage, and we're kind of in that in-between stage. We have the hope of heaven and hope of eternity, but we're also not in our old death that we used to be in, right? So you kind of feel the place he's in. So he went between Bethel and Ai to the place that he had been, and he made an altar. So he's going to repent again, right? For that last screw up. He made an altar at the first, and there Abram called upon the name of the Lord. And like I said before, when you stumble, there's always an altar for you to go to. And Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, so that the land could not support both of them dwelling together. For their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abraham's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. At the time, the Canaanites and the Perizzites were dwelling in the land. So here we have in this land, Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Abramites, and the Lotites, all trying to share this land. And apparently the land could not sustain all of their flocks. Sometimes it's just basic science, right? I mean, you can't have too many animals grazing the same land. Eventually, it just runs out, and there's going to be fighting. Well, this is our spot. We found this spot first, right? You can almost hear it. Well, why did your bull come and mate all of our cows? You can almost hear all these debates that are happening, these arguments that are happening. In verse 8, and Abram said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between you and me, and between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, for we are kinsmen." And that brother is like, we're brothers. We're, not literally, we weren't literally brothers, but you get and so he's like, we shouldn't be fighting like this. And he was right. So it's pretty cool what Abraham does. This is a really positive thing he does here. And isn't it kind of encouragement that Abraham, that this great hero of the faith, screws up? Isn't it an encouragement to us though, right? Because we're like, okay, sometimes people try to, all of these people in the Bible, like David's going to royally screw up. Solomon's going to screw up. Samson's going to screw up. They're all going to have screw ups, but God uses screw ups. Isn't that nice? Because we're all screw ups, right? It's cool that God chooses to use us. So he said, "Is not this whole land before you? Separate yourself from me. If you take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if you take the right hand, then I will go to the left." Wow, that's really nice of Abraham. You see what he's saying? Basically, you choose, and I'll take what's left, which is pretty cool of him. And it's going to end up to his favor, as you guys know, as I think you have an idea what's coming. "And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw the Jordan Valley." So the part where the Jordan River runs through, and it's got all this moisture and lush plants growing and well watered. There's plenty of water for his flock. And he notices all that. And so he says, and so Lot lifted up his eyes and saw that the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. It reminded him of Egypt and the Nile in the direction of Zoar. And it says, this was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. I think it's kind of obvious. So Lot chose for himself the Jordan Valley, and Lot journeyed east. Thus they separated from each other. And Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled among the cities of the valley and moved his tent as far as Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord. The Lord said to Abraham, after Lot had separated from him, "Lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, westward." So he's telling Abraham, stop. I want you to look. Look that way. Look that way. Look that way. Look that way, as far as you can see. And he says, "For all the land that you see, I will give to you and to your offspring until 70 AD. No, what does it say? Forever. So this land is promised to the Israelites, the Jews, forever. He's going to say this like multiple times, by the way, in case there's any confusion. "I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, your offspring also will be counted. Arise, walk through the length and the breadth of the land, for I will give it to you." So Abram moved his tent and came and settled by the oaks of Mamre, which are at Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. It seems like that altar is a praise altar. Of course, I'm just gathering these things from context. You know, like I said, there's different kind of sacrifices you can do, but I'm just gathering from context that this one will be a praise one. Okay, chapter 14. Man, we're making all kinds of progress tonight, aren't we? In the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goyim, these kings made war with Bera, king of Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shebnar, king of Zoibim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. And all these joined forces in the valley of Siddim, that is the Salt Sea, you know, the Dead Sea. 12 years they had served Chedorlaomer, but in the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year of Chedorlaomer, I have no idea how to pronounce that, I'm guessing, and the kings who were with him came and defeated the Rephaim in Ashtaroth Karnaim, the Zuzan and Ham, the Emim in Shevakir, whatever that is, and the Horites in the hill country of Seir, as far as El Paran on the border of the wilderness. Then they turned back and came to En Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and defeated all the country of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites who were dwelling in Hazon Tamar. So, okay, so there's these bunch of the people, bunch of kings get together, they make an alliance, and they just start wiping people out. They start going through, robbing and looting. That's what's going on here. Then the king of Sodom, which is where Lot's living, the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, the king of Zobuim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar, went out, and they joined battle in the valley of Siddim with Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, Tidal, king of Goim, Aphrael, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. Now the valley of Siddim was full of bitumen pits, and as the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, some fell into them. Man, that's bad luck. And the rest fled into the hill country. So the enemy took all the possessions of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions, and they went their way. They also, here's the bad part, they also took Lot, the son of Abram's brother, who was dwelling in Sodom, and his possessions, and went their way. Okay, so they come, they attack all these people, they go to war, these other kings win, and they kidnap Lot and everything he owns. Then one who escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, who was living by the oaks of Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and of Aner. These were allies of Abram. When Abram heard that his kinsmen had been taken captive, he led forth his trained men born in his house, 318 of them, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. So he's running down this army, trying to get his nephew back. He gets all of his fighting men and starts chasing them down. And he divided, verse 15, and he divided his forces against them by night. He's being very strategic. He's splitting up his men, and he's going to attack at night so he can come from different directions. He and his servants and defeated them and pursued them to Habah, north of Damascus. Then he brought back all the possessions and also brought back his kinsman Lot with his possessions and the women and the people. Well, that's a good happy ending. I think that story is pretty self-explanatory. It's a lot of crazy names, but you get the point, right? Any questions about that? It's just a lot of crazy names, but you understand what happened? Okay. Verse 17, after his return from the meet of Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him in the valley of Sheva. So the king of Sodom is going to come out to meet Abram. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of God Most High. And he blessed him and said, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand." It's pretty cool that God got the glory for this, isn't it? Because you would think that maybe he wouldn't, but the fact that they praised Abram's God kind of leads me to believe that Abram directed the praise to God. Abram, thank you so much. You're so awesome. And I think he directed them. It was my God that gave me the victory, because they're praising Abram's God here. And Abram gave him 1/10 of everything. Why did he give Melchizedek 1/10 of everything? Well, we see here that Melchizedek was a priest of God Most High. That's what it says. So he was a priest of the one true God. And so he gave him 1/10, which is a tithe. We do know that whenever Moses gives the law, that he tells the people to support the priests, the Levites, by giving them 1/10 of all that you have. So apparently this was something that God already told people to do. Abram was giving a tithe to a priest who was Melchizedek. And the king of Sodom said to Abram, "Give me the persons, but take the goods for yourself." In other words, he wants the slaves, but you can take all the money from the loot, is what he's basically saying to him. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, "I have lifted my hand to the Lord, God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and I would not take a thread or a sandal strap or anything that is yours." In other words, he's saying, you can have it all, Sodom, lest you should say, "I have made Abram rich." In other words, he didn't want Sodom to take credit for Abram's success, right? Well, I gave him everything he had because that's what he is trying to avoid happening. "I will take nothing but what your young men have eaten, and the share of the men who went with me. Let Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre take their share." So there's something to be said for that. You don't want to let your pride get in the way. I don't think this was about pride. By let your pride get in the way, you try to help somebody who's in need of help, and they're like, I'm going to do it myself. You've all encountered people like that, right? And sometimes it's like, dude, accept some help. There's no shame in that. But this isn't about that. Abram got the victory, and the king of Sodom says, give me the people we captured. You can take all the money and everything else. And Abram said, you keep it all. And it says why he said that, because he didn't want the king of Sodom to take credit for Abram's wealth. So I think that's a good place to stop for today. We're a little bit early, but that's okay, because that's a good stopping point. Comments, questions? Johnny, I know you got some comments. Got anything today?
Yeah, you were talking about the money. It says that God will provide you with anything you want. He makes you become rich if you want to. He gives you.
Yeah, there's no promise he's going to make us rich, but yeah, he provides for our needs. He he does promise to make us rich spiritually and to have that richness of heart, contentment. Godliness and contentment are of great gain. It says in Proverbs, content with what we have. But there's no promise that he's going to make us rich.
Yeah, something like you give tithe, you get.
Oh yeah. The last couple verses of the Old Testament is what you're talking about. I'll turn there. Micah chapter 3. Wait, not Micah. That's right. I'm not in Micah. I was like, why isn't it not in there? I was in Habakkuk. Okay, Malachi chapter 4. I thought it was in the last chapter. Oh, okay. Okay, this is it. Bring Malachi chapter 3, verse 10. Bring the full tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. In other words, take care of the priest, take care of my house. In our day, you could say like pastors, the church. Bring the full tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house, and thereby put me to the test, says the Lord of hosts, if I will not open the windows of heaven for you and pour down on you such a blessing that there is no more need. You're right, Johnny, and that's what I talked about in that sermon about you really can't outgive God. There's no in the New Testament, there's no you have to give 10% anymore, but in the reality, you're robbing yourself of blessing if you don't. And I don't know what any of you give, so don't take offense. I have no idea, but you are, if you are not giving, and if you do not give regularly, then you are robbing yourself of blessing, because you cannot outgive God. You just cannot. He always comes through in amazing ways, and it's almost makes it really fun to give. Because you're looking forward to seeing how God's going to bless you for it.
We say that even now, it's good to give the tithe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But that was meant for priests, right?
Yeah. So the new version of it would be the church and pastors, the New Testament. So in Acts, they were bringing their gifts to the laying at the apostles' feet, and Paul says. Take a collection in Mesopotamia, and I'll gather it and take it to the church. And so giving is a regular thing. It just no longer has to be 10%, or it's a sin, which is what it was in the Old Testament. So he says, give as you have decided in your heart, not out of obligation, for the Lord loves a cheerful giver. That's what it says. So.
From a grouch.
Yeah, right. He doesn't want you to give because you feel like you have to, because then you're doing it with the wrong spirit anyways, right? We should be giving because we're so grateful for what God has done for us, because we want to see Him work in the church and work in the world and spread the gospel, and because we really believe that He will bless us for our giving, and will always give to us, provide for our needs.
Well, you give because the Bible tells you to give. Like it
Yeah.
says, if you believe in the Bible, you do what the Bible tells you to give.
Yeah.
And even though, like you said, you don't give the whole 10%, you give what you can.
Mhm.
Still, God understands. He can check your heart. He knows what.
And Abraham gave a tenth. As far as we know, there wasn't like a requirement to give a tenth. That's just what he chose to give, and the tenth was what God said to give to Israel. So it's a good model for us to use. That's why Don and I, we do 10%, not because it's like we think it's some law, just because it is the model that's set forth in the scriptures, right? Is it not? At the very least. So it seems like a good place to start. you know. So
Back in Adam and Eve, we spoke of marrying siblings and stuff.
Yeah.
And obviously they're still doing that.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
When do they stop doing that? Or when do they start taking more?
The Mosaic law. God tells them. Yes, you'll see it. It'll come soon here. And yeah, so it'll. No, because it still wasn't. He never said they couldn't do it yet. It was never a law yet, a moral law yet. He lays down some of these moral laws a little bit later. So there was certain ones. He laid out what marriage is between one man and one woman, but it doesn't say they can't be, a half brother and sister. It doesn't say that yet. It sounds bizarre to us, right? And it does. I get it. I get that it sounds bizarre to us, but that law was given to protect us later because of genetics, right? And that they didn't have that gene pool issue yet that we would have now if I would have had babies with my sister. Right? That sounds disgusting to me, but that's because that is a cultural thing where it's to us it's like, right? But you have to realize too, like we Americans, we think whatever we think is like the gospel sometimes, right? Like let me just give you one example. Don and I were met and married in 4 months. People are like, well, you should date for at least a year. Well, says who? Like, where do you get that? Most of the world, there's a lot of places that do arranged marriages. There was a period of time, including the Bible, it was arranged marriages. There was a period of time where you would just marry for strategic purposes or for money purposes, and it was a business, almost like a business transaction. The married for love thing is not the norm through all of human history. And I'm not advocating for either any particular way. It's like that's our American position, our Western culture, saying that you should marry for love. That is not something the Bible ever says. That is not something that most of human history ever did. So, what I'm saying is stuff that it sounds weird to us, it doesn't make it weird. So it's back then, it was not weird to marry your half brother or sister. It was normal. So because God hadn't made it, God hadn't declared it. It wasn't a problem yet genetically. So He will soon, very soon, in like a couple hundred years from now.
God is the one that changed.
Yeah. He says in Leviticus chapter 18, do not lay with your mother or your sister, or stuff like that. Yeah, because it was very common in the surrounding cultures. So He was telling them to be different.
Yeah, your close family don't take you, but like if it's a stepbrother or stepsister, they kind of separate.
Yeah, because there's no genetic.
Their bloodline is a little bit different.
Yeah, there's no genetic comparison between you and a step relative, and you can do that. You can marry a stepsister in the United States. She's not really your sister.
It's about a different area. I noticed they keep talking about the slaves and the property, and as they move around, the slaves go around. Where do these slaves come from?
Yes.
What category are they from? They just grab some other people and make them slaves?
Yeah.
Are they from down in Africa?
No, other people, they're just getting people they conquered. They would just take them.
But the other people and cultures, that didn't come about. So what? Tower of Babel, and we went different directions.
Right.
But wouldn't they still be that same group of people that God made, man of the need?
Yeah, but we're 2,000 years now. It's been 2,000 years. So just think of how much things have changed since now in the time of Jesus. That's been 2,000 years.
Yeah.
So 2,000 years, a lot of stuff has changed. A lot of people spread out. There's a lot of generations, a lot of babies, a lot of time passed. You know, it's a whole different world. So yeah, they would just conquer some people. They'd capture some of the people for slaves. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that they some generation like they wanted to stay in their own generation. Like the Jews want to stay with the Jews. Or
Yeah, that's the tendency, right?
And
Yeah.
then when they started cross marrying with other
hmm
tribes of people, that's why it changed.
Yeah. Right. Oh, and God.
America is so mixed up with different tribes of people, different races of people.
hmm Every ethnicity has been enslaved and has had slaves. Every single one. So,
I just finished reading a book about American ethnics.
no.
And Thomas Sowell, famous black.
Oh yeah, I know so well. Yeah. hmm
He traced each ethnic group that came to the United States, starting with like the Irish
hmm
and the Germans,
The Irish were slaves.
the Italians, and the blacks, West Indians, all kinds of. All of them went through some kind of
hmm
terrible
Yeah.
issue. In
Yeah.
fact, I can't remember which one it is, but some of those were treated much worse than blacks.
The Native Americans conquered each other and enslaved each other. You know, it's not like they're a bunch of peace-loving people before we got here. You know, I'm just saying. I'm not. You know, that's just a fact.
Yeah, I was trying to say I heard that the German is the top people in America. They have more Germans in America than other people. You know. They're not just all German because they fought for each other. I'm from Germany. I'm Dutch German. And my mother's side, her dad was German, and her mother was Dutch. She's Dutch German.